Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. The blood splatter on my Brioni suit cost more than what most people make in a month. I stared at the crimson stain spreading across the Italian fabric, a surreal contrast against the pristine white as I watched San Francisco burn from the Bay Bridge. The rifle felt foreign in my hands, still warm from the shots that had bought me seconds of life. 6 hours ago, I was Elliot Wellick, celebrated CEO of Neurocore Technologies, signing contracts worth billions. Now I was just another survivor with a stolen weapon. It started during our executive board meeting. The floor-to-ceiling windows of our conference room offered a panoramic view of San Francisco Bay, the afternoon sun glinting off the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. I was mid-sentence about quarterly projections when my assistant burst in without knocking, something she'd never done in 5 years of employment. "Mr. Wellick?" Vanessa's voice cracked, her typically immaculate appearance disheveled. "Something's happening downstairs. Security can't contain it." Before I could respond, the building trembled. A distant explosion sent pigeons scattering from nearby rooftops. Through the windows, black smoke billowed from the financial district. Julian, my CFO, pulled out his phone. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, showing me the screen. Live footage showed chaos erupting in Union Square, people attacking each other, but not like any riot I'd seen. The attackers moved with a savage, relentless focus, tearing at victims with their teeth. Our head of security, Vex, rushed in, blood staining his white dress shirt. "Sir, we need to move you now. The lobby's been breached." I looked at the faces around the table, people I'd worked with for years, built an empire with. "What about my employees?" "No time," Vex insisted, already moving toward the private elevator. "Whatever this is, it's spreading throughout downtown." The building's alarms activated with an ear-splitting wail as we hurried down the corridor. Through glass walls, I glimpsed the programming department in chaos, developers pushing desks against doors, others frantically trying their phones. "What exactly is happening?" I demanded as Vex punched the elevator call button repeatedly. "Some kind of outbreak," he replied, drawing his sidearm. "Started at St. Francis Medical. Patients attacking staff, then each other. Anyone bitten gets sick within minutes, then they turn aggressive, mindless. Security footage looks like something out of a horror movie." The elevator doors opened, revealing our head of marketing, Diane. At least it had been Diane. Her blonde hair was matted with blood, her jaw snapping wildly, dark veins visible beneath her ashen skin. She lunged forward with startling speed. Vex raised his weapon and fired. The bullet grazed her shoulder, tearing fabric and flesh, but barely slowing her advance. She kept coming, fingers clawing the air between us. Vex adjusted his aim and fired twice more in rapid succession. The first shot caught her in the throat, sending a spray of dark blood across the elevator doors. The second pierced her left eye, dropping her instantly to the floor, where she lay still, twitching once before going completely motionless. "Headshots," Vex said grimly. "Nothing else stops them." My mind struggled to process what I'd just witnessed. Diane had presented marketing reports that morning, complained about her son's college applications, laughed at someone's joke about cryptocurrency. "They're not people anymore, sir," Vex said, reading my expression as we stepped around her body into the elevator. "Not after they turn." The descent was silent except for the emergency broadcasts coming through Vex's radio. The situation was deteriorating rapidly across the Bay Area. The infection, whatever it was, spread through bites. Symptoms developed within minutes. Military quarantine protocols were failing. When the elevator stopped at the parking garage level, Vex raised his hand for silence. Moans echoed through the concrete structure, punctuated by distant screams and the occasional car alarm. "Stay close," he whispered. We moved through the dimly lit garage toward the executive parking area. The air smelled of gasoline and something metallic, blood. Abandoned vehicles blocked several lanes, some with doors left open, keys still in ignition. We were halfway to my Tesla when shapes emerged from behind a support column. 3 figures, moving with that terrible predatory purpose. Former employees, their faces contorted in mindless hunger. Vex aimed and fired in one fluid motion. The first infected dropped. He swung toward the second but stumbled on an oil slick. The infected closed the distance with frightening speed, teeth sinking into Vex's forearm as they crashed against a car. Froze, useless. Julian grabbed a tire iron from an open trunk and swung it wildly at the third infected, buying me precious seconds. Vex managed to put a bullet through his attacker's skull, then turned to help Julian. Blood poured from the bite on his arm. "Take this," he gasped, pressing his pistol into my hand. "I'm already done for. Head for the hills, away from population centers. I can't just leave you. You don't have a choice." He cut me off, his skin already taking on a grayish hue. 15 minutes tops. That's how long I have before I become one of them. Now go. Julian and I backed away, watching Vex slump against a concrete pillar. He nodded once, then closed his eyes. My Tesla wouldn't respond to the key fob, network down. Of course, the smartest car in the garage would be useless without connectivity. We headed for the street exit on foot, the pistol heavy in my hand. Emerging onto Market Street was like stepping into a war zone. The financial district had transformed into a nightmare landscape of abandoned vehicles, shattered glass, and distant screams. Smoke billowed from multiple buildings as sirens wailed in continuous overlapping patterns. "Oakland," Julian muttered, his eyes fixed on the distant shoreline across the bay. "My wife and daughter are waiting for me." I thought of my empty penthouse. No family waiting, no one who needed me. Just wealth and prestige that suddenly meant nothing. "The Bay Bridge might still be passable," I said, checking the pistol's magazine. 8 rounds plus 2 extra clips on Vex's belt that I'd grabbed. "It's our best shot." We made it 3 blocks before encountering the military blockade. 2 Humvees and a light tank had established a perimeter, sandbags piled high around their positions. Soldiers in full combat gear fired continuously at anything that moved. The staccato rattle of automatic weapons created a deafening wall of sound. An infected in a postal worker's uniform stumbled into the open. 4 soldiers opened fire simultaneously, their bullets tearing the body apart until it finally collapsed in a heap of shredded flesh. Another infected appeared from an alley, then another and another. The soldiers kept firing, their faces masks of desperate determination. "They're panicking," Julian whispered. "No containment strategy, just shooting everything." He was right. This wasn't an organized military response. This was raw survival instinct. As we watched from behind an overturned delivery truck, one of the Humvees started its engine and reversed suddenly, crushing a soldier who had been reloading. The vehicle sped away, leaving the remaining troops exposed. The infected swarmed the position, overwhelming the soldiers in seconds. Screams mingled with gunfire, then faded into wet, tearing sounds. "Now's our chance," I said, while they're distracted. We darted from our hiding place, keeping low. A soldier lay sprawled near the abandoned tank, the top half of his body missing. His M4 rifle was still clutched in his lifeless hands. "Take it," Julian urged. "I'll keep the pistol." I pried the weapon from the soldier's grasp, along with 3 magazines from his tactical vest. The rifle felt heavy in my hands. I'd never fired anything larger than a sporting clay shotgun at charity events, but the basics seemed simple enough. Point and pull the trigger. We navigated through side streets toward the Bay Bridge, encountering scattered groups of infected. Julian fired the pistol twice, missing both times. I kept the rifle ready but conserved ammunition. The bridge entrance was a scene from hell. Abandoned cars stretched as far as we could see, many with blood-splattered windows. Bodies lay scattered across the lanes, some still moving despite grievous injuries. Halfway across, a gasoline tanker had overturned and burned, its charred skeleton blocking most of the roadway. "We can still make it," Julian insisted, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "There's space to squeeze through on the pedestrian walkway." We climbed over the concrete barrier separating the road from the pedestrian path. From here, we could see Oakland's shoreline, pillars of smoke rising from multiple locations. The infection had reached the East Bay. Julian walked ahead, the pistol held awkwardly in front of him. We'd made it perhaps a quarter mile onto the bridge when the moaning started. At first, it seemed to come from all directions, an acoustic trick created by the water and bridge structure. Then I saw them, a group of infected emerging from the abandoned cars ahead, drawn by our movement. "Back!" I hissed, but Julian was already raising the pistol. "I can handle this," he said, firing wildly. The shots echoed across the water, attracting more attention. More infected appeared behind us, cutting off our retreat. "Julian, stop!" I grabbed for his arm, but he shook me off. "I'm getting to my family!" he shouted, firing again and again until the slide locked back on an empty chamber. His face fell as he realized his mistake. The infected converged from both directions, drawn by the noise. Julian backed against the railing, fumbling to reload with shaking hands. I raised the rifle, firing in controlled bursts as Vex would have done. 3 infected dropped before I heard Julian scream. One of them had slipped past my fire, lunging at Julian with terrible speed. Its teeth sank into his neck, tearing away a chunk of flesh. Blood sprayed across the concrete as Julian toppled backward, the infected following him down. More swarmed him, obscuring his body from view. His screams turned to gurgling, then silence. I backed away, continuing to fire until the rifle clicked empty. Reloading was impossible. More infected blocked both directions now, creating a closing circle around me. Dozens of them stumbled forward, their collective moans rising like a hideous tide. The railing pressed against my back. Below, the dark waters of the bay churned, whitecaps visible in the fading daylight. The drop was at least 100 feet. More infected approached, their bloody hands reaching for me. I looked down at the churning water, then back at the advancing horde. No choice. I dropped the empty rifle, climbed onto the railing, and jumped. The impact with the bay water drove every molecule of air from my lungs. Icy cold seized my chest like a vice as I plunged beneath the surface. Disorientation immediate and complete. My expensive suit, now a death trap, dragged me down into the murky depths. Fighting blind panic, I clawed upward. My lungs screamed for oxygen, muscles already burning from exertion. When I finally broke the surface, I gasped desperately. Salt water streaming from my nose and mouth. The current was stronger than I'd anticipated, already carrying me away from the bridge where silhouettes of infected still prowled the railing. I shed my jacket, watching it sink. $3,000 of Italian wool disappearing in seconds. My shoes followed, then my tie. Each discarded item increased my chances minutely. But the shore remained impossibly distant. The water was frigid. Hypothermia would kill me before I could reach land unless I found something, anything to keep me afloat. The bay churned with debris, grim evidence of civilization's collapse. A plastic cooler bobbed 20 feet away, just visible in the fading light. I lunged for it, straining against the current. My fingertips brushed its surface once, twice, before finally catching the handle. Using the last of my strength, I flipped it open. 6 beer cans nestled inside. I removed 3, wedged my arm through the handle, and created a makeshift float. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. My body temperature plummeted despite my efforts to keep moving. The shore remained elusive, a dark smudge against the horizon. San Francisco burned behind me, flames consuming the skyline I'd surveyed from my corner office mere hours ago. The current pulled me sideways toward rocky shorelines where breaking waves could dash me against stone. My muscles cramped painfully. The cooler slipped from my grasp twice, the third time nearly disappearing before I caught it. Each time my head dipped beneath the water, resurfacing became harder. My limbs grew numb, responses sluggish. Consciousness began to fade. I didn't feel the impact when my body hit the rocks. Didn't remember releasing the cooler. The world tilted sideways, then black. "He's still breathing." A woman's voice, urgent but controlled. "Help me get him up before they see us." Rough hands grabbed my shoulders, dragging me across sharp stones. Pain returned in waves, burning lungs, scraped skin, muscles screaming in protest. I coughed violently, expelling water, struggling to focus on the figures looming above me. "Stay quiet," a male voice ordered. "They're coming." My vision cleared gradually. A man in tattered military fatigues crouched beside me, his face streaked with blood and grime. Beside him, a woman with close-cropped dark hair surveyed the shoreline. A second woman, younger with a red bandana tied around her neck, pressed her fingers to my wrist, checking my pulse. "I saw him hit the rocks," the younger woman whispered. "Thought he was dead until he started coughing." The soldier pressed a finger to his lips, pointing toward the water's edge. Through the gathering dusk, I spotted them, infected shambling along the shoreline. Not isolated individuals, but a group moving with that terrible single-minded purpose. "Can you move?" the soldier asked. His name tape read, Russo. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. Every muscle in my body protested as I shifted to my knees. "I'm Mira," the dark-haired woman said, helping me up. "Former paramedic. This is Russo and Danny. We need to get off this beach." "Elliot," I managed, voice raw from salt water. The infected moved with unnatural focus, drawn to something further down the shore. Russo watched them through binoculars. "Distraction won't last," he muttered. "Marina's half a mile north. We might find a boat there." "It'll be crawling with them," Mira warned. "Everyone tried to escape by water when the roads jammed." "Better than staying here," Russo countered, handing me a combat knife, serrated edge. "Military grade. Headshots drop them instantly. Body shots just make them angry." When the last of the infected disappeared around a bend, we moved, first at a crouch, then breaking into a staggering run. My wet clothes chafed with each step, bare feet bleeding on the rocky ground. Danny supported me on one side, surprisingly strong for her slender frame. "I worked on the ferries," she explained between breaths. "Was heading to my shift when everything went crazy. Saw the whole city fall apart from the water." "What happened to you?" I asked Russo, who led our group with practiced efficiency. His face hardened. "My unit was securing the stadium evacuation point. Had nearly 2,000 civilians inside when the perimeter collapsed. Infected breached from multiple entry points simultaneously." He checked his rifle as we ran. "Commanded 26 soldiers this morning. By noon, I was the only one left." We reached a chain-link fence separating the beach from a service road. Russo cut through with wire cutters, creating a gap just large enough to squeeze through. As I followed the others, an infected spotted us from 50 yards away, a dock worker judging by his tattered uniform. His moan alerted others, and suddenly they were converging on our position with terrifying speed. "Run!" Russo barked, firing controlled bursts at the closest threats. We sprinted across open ground, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. An infected woman in medical scrubs lunged from behind a dumpster, grabbing Danny's jacket. I drove the combat knife into the infected's eye socket before consciously deciding to move. The body dropped instantly. "Nice work," Danny gasped, pulling free. The marina appeared ahead, dozens of boats still moored to their slips. The sight would have been encouraging if not for the infected swarming the entire area, hundreds of them moving between vessels or wandering the piers. "So much for that plan," Mira breathed. "We need to thin them out," Russo decided, scanning the area. "Create a distraction, open a path to one of those smaller boats." He pointed to a fuel truck overturned near the marina entrance. "That'll draw them. Fire and noise. They can't resist it." "You're going to blow it up?" Danny asked incredulously. Russo produced a flare gun from his tactical vest. "Standard issue. One shot, but it'll do the job." He created a makeshift fuse using a rag soaked in diesel from a damaged pump. The plan was simple but desperate. Ignite the fuel trail leading to the truck, sprint for the docks while the infected converged on the explosion. "We'll have maybe 2 minutes," he warned, checking the pistol he'd given Mira. "Aim for the head, don't waste ammo on body shots, and don't stop running no matter what." As if summoned by our planning, jet engines screamed overhead, fighter planes moving at terrifying speed toward San Francisco. Moments later, multiple explosions rocked the bay, the ground trembling beneath our feet. Through gaps between warehouses, I saw sections of the bay bridge collapsing into the water, suspension cables snapping like thread. "They're cutting off the peninsula," Russo said, his voice flat. "Now or never." He fired the flare gun. the burning projectile arcing toward the fuel trail. Flames raced toward the overturned truck as we sprinted toward the marina's side entrance. The explosion when it came was deafening, a fireball rising hundreds of feet into the air, secondary blasts as nearby vehicles ignited. The infected responded immediately, turning as one toward the flames, drawn by noise and light. We ran in the opposite direction, staying low, using their distraction to reach the first dock. There, Danny pointed to a small rowboat moored at the furthest pier. No engine, but we can use the current to get across the bay. We moved as quickly as stealth allowed, dispatching isolated infected with knife strikes rather than gunfire. Halfway to our target, an infected fell from the deck of a larger boat, landing directly in our path. Its shriek before Russo silenced it, alerted others nearby. "Run!" he ordered, abandoning stealth entirely. We sprinted the remaining distance, infected closing from both sides of the pier. Danny reached the rowboat first, untying mooring lines with the practiced hands of someone who'd worked on the water her entire life. Mira and I jumped aboard, nearly falling as the vessel rocked beneath our feet. Russo provided covering fire, dropping infected with mechanical precision as they closed in. "Russo!" Mira shouted, the boat drifting away from the dock. He turned to jump, but an infected tackled him from behind. They tumbled onto the wooden planks, Russo's rifle skittering away. He fought with trained precision, using elbows and knees to create space. I raised my pistol but couldn't fire. The struggle made a clean shot impossible. Russo managed to draw his combat knife, driving it through his attacker's skull, but more infected were seconds away. He looked up, meeting my eyes across the widening gap between boat and pier. "Get clear of the city," he shouted, retrieving his rifle as he backed toward the pier's edge. "Angel Island. It's defensible. Jump," I called back. He shook his head, firing controlled bursts at the approaching horde. "Too late. I'll buy you time." Mira caught my arm as I moved to jump back onto the pier. "Don't," she said, voice breaking. "He's right. The boat won't hold with more infected following." The current carried us away as Russo established a defensive position at the pier's end, infected converging from all sides. His rifle fired in measured bursts, each shot dropping an attacker, but they kept coming in overwhelming numbers. The last I saw of him, he was reloading with mechanical calm, completely surrounded but fighting with unwavering discipline. "He knew the odds," Danny said quietly, using an oar to guide our course. He made his choice. Behind us, the marina receded into distance, orange flames from the burning fuel truck casting everything in hellish light. Further explosions rocked the city as military jets continued their systematic destruction of transportation infrastructure. "They're sealing it off," Mira observed, watching another bridge collapse in the distance, containing the infection. The reality was more brutal. They were sacrificing everyone still trapped inside. Thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, abandoned to the infected, including Russo. The rowing boat drifted eastward, carried by current rather than engine power in the still evening air. The lights of Oakland's shoreline revealed similar chaos. Fires burning unchecked, infected wandering in growing numbers. No safe harbor there. "Angel Island," I remembered Russo's last words. He said it was defensible. Danny nodded, adjusting our course with practiced strokes of the oar. "Former military installation, natural barriers, minimal access points. If anywhere in the bay might be safe, that's it." The boat moved with agonizing slowness, each minute stretching as we watched the cities burn around us. No helicopters flew rescue missions. No boats patrolled the waters. The official response, it seemed, had shifted entirely to containment rather than evacuation. Angel Island grew larger as we approached, its shoreline blessedly free of infected. Danny guided the boat toward a small dock on the eastern side, using her oar with skilled precision. When the hull scraped against weathered wood, I jumped out with the mooring line securing us quickly. The island appeared deserted, emergency lighting at the ranger station providing the only illumination. We approached cautiously, Mira with her pistol ready, me with the combat knife Russo had given me, Danny carrying an oar like a staff. The building stood empty, no signs of military presence or infected. "Looks clear," Danny said, lowering her makeshift weapon. "For now." The station yielded valuable resources: emergency rations, bottled water, a first aid kit, flashlights, a hand crank radio. We treated our injuries in silence, the full weight of the day's events finally settling over us as adrenaline faded. Through the station's windows, San Francisco and Oakland burned on opposite shores of the bay. Military jets continued systematic strikes on infrastructure, ensuring nothing could cross from the infected zones to the wider region. We had been on watch for about 3 hours when we heard it, the rhythmic thump of rotor blades slicing through the night air. At first, I thought it was another military aircraft on a containment mission, but the sound was different, closer, more erratic. "Helicopter," Danny shouted, pointing to a wavering light in the darkness. The aircraft was flying low, its searchlight sweeping frantically across the island's terrain. The engine made a sputtering sound that even I recognized as mechanical trouble. "It's going down," Mira said, already moving toward the door. "We need to mark a landing zone." We grabbed the emergency flares from the ranger station and raced outside, spreading out across the clearing near the dock. The helicopter's descent was becoming increasingly unstable, its trajectory wobbly as it fought against some invisible force. "Here!" I shouted, igniting a flare and waving it in wide arcs above my head. Danny and Mira did the same, creating a triangle of red light in the darkness. The pilot must have seen us. The helicopter banked sharply, aiming for our makeshift landing zone. But something was clearly wrong. The aircraft dipped dangerously to one side, nearly clipping the treetops before the pilot managed to correct course. When it finally touched down, it was less a landing than a controlled crash. The skids hit the ground hard, the entire frame bouncing once before the tail rotor struck dirt, sending a shower of sparks into the night air. Metal screamed against metal as the helicopter slid several yards before coming to rest, tilted at an unnatural angle. For a moment, everything was still. Then the side door slid open and a man tumbled out, crawling desperately away from the wreckage. "Help!" he shouted, his voice nearly lost in the dying whine of the engine. "We've got wounded," and one of them turned. We rushed forward, weapons ready. The man who'd escaped was dressed in civilian clothes, his face streaked with blood and sweat. "4 survivors inside," he gasped as we reached him. "And the pilot, he's alive but pinned. And Dean got bit during evacuation. He turned mid-flight. That's why we crashed." Screams erupted from inside the helicopter, followed by the unmistakable moans of an infected. I peered through the open door and saw chaos. The interior lights flickering, shadowy figures struggling in the confined space. Blood splattered the windows from inside. The pilot first, I decided, ducking into the cramped cabin. The cockpit had partially collapsed, trapping the pilot beneath twisted metal. 2 passengers, a woman in a blood-spattered navy pencil skirt and shredded silk blouse and a teenage boy, were pressing themselves against the far wall, trying to stay clear of the infected who had once been their fellow survivor. A 3rd passenger, an older man, was fighting to keep the infected at bay with what looked like a broken piece of the helicopter's interior paneling. Mira slipped past me, pistol raised. "Head shot," she reminded herself aloud, taking careful aim despite the confined space and poor lighting. Her first bullet caught the infected in the shoulder, spinning him but not stopping him. The second found its mark, entering through the temple and dropping him instantly. "Get them out," I told Danny, who began helping the shell-shocked survivors from the wreckage. The pilot was barely conscious, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. Part of the control panel had broken loose in the crash, pinning his legs. "We need to lift this," I told Mira, positioning myself at one end of the metal debris. On 3, we strained against the weight, muscles burning with effort. The metal shifted just enough for the pilot to pull himself free, a scream of pain escaping through clenched teeth as his injured leg dragged across the floor. "Cargo," he managed to say, pointing toward the rear compartment. "Supplies, military evac. We were supposed to reach Marin County Outpost." Outside, Danny had moved the other survivors to a safe distance. The teenager was sobbing quietly, the woman comforting him with an arm around his shoulders. The older man stood slightly apart, his eyes fixed on the burning cities across the bay. "We need to check for more infected," I said, retrieving a flashlight from my pocket. The rear compartment had been packed with supplies, medical kits, non-perishable food, bottled water, ammunition, and tactical gear. Military-grade provisions meant for an evacuation that would never happen now. In the corner lay the infected we'd neutralized. Once Dean, a young man in his 20s, now just another casualty of whatever hell had been unleashed upon the world. "Dean was fine when we took off," the woman in the tattered silk blouse explained as we began unloading supplies. "Said a crazy homeless guy had grabbed him at the evac point, but we didn't realize it was a bite. Started convulsing about 10 minutes into the flight. Turned before anyone could react. The pilot's condition was deteriorating rapidly." Mira, falling back on her paramedic training, examined him with practiced efficiency. "Compound fracture of the tibia," she reported. "Possible internal bleeding. He needs more than field first aid." We moved him into the ranger station, creating a makeshift medical bay with supplies from both our scavenged materials and the helicopter's cargo. The military-grade medical kit contained items Mira immediately recognized: pressure bandages, morphine auto-injectors, battlefield antibiotics. "This helps," she said, unpacking the supplies, but without surgery. The pilot, semi-conscious, seemed to understand his situation. "The outpost," he whispered. "Marin Headlands, Field Hospital." "Across the water," I said, looking out at the bay. The fires in San Francisco had diminished somewhat, but Oakland still burned bright. We'd never make it in a rowboat. "Helicopters, done," the pilot confirmed. "Fuel line, ruptured, engine damage." Danny, who had been inventorying our newly acquired supplies, joined us. "We've got enough food now to last weeks. Ammunition, even some communications equipment. Though I don't know if anyone's broadcasting." The 3 other survivors huddled together in the corner of the station, civilians caught in a catastrophe none of us had been prepared for. The teenage boy hadn't spoken a word since the crash, his eyes vacant with shock. The woman maintained a facade of composure that occasionally cracked, revealing raw fear beneath. The older man seemed resigned, as if he'd already accepted this new reality. "We should bury the infected," I suggested, not wanting the bodies to remain inside the helicopter. "And check the entire island at first light. Make sure we're really alone here." As we worked through the night, treating the pilot's injuries as best we could with Mira's guidance, securing the perimeter around the station, and organizing our supplies, a grim determination settled over our growing group of survivors. The pilot, despite Mira's best efforts, remained in critical condition. Without proper medical facilities, his chances were slim. Yet he fought, providing what information he could about military protocols, evacuation zones, and the last communications he'd received before all channels went silent. By dawn, we had established a rudimentary camp around the ranger station. The helicopter's supplies, combined with what we'd found, gave us a fighting chance at survival, at least in the short term. 12 hours, I said, checking my watch, somehow still functioning despite my swim. 12 hours since this started. Mira nodded, staring at the burning cities. I was intubating a car crash victim when the first infected reached the ER. Hospital protocol isn't designed for zombies. Is that what they are? Danny asked. I don't know, Mira admitted. The infection hijacks the brain, eliminates higher functions, leaves only aggression and the drive to spread through bites. Medically, they're still alive, but the person is gone. I thought of Diane from marketing, of the infected teen on the bridge, of Russo fighting his desperate last stand. People I'd known or just met, reduced to mindless predators or casualties of a collapse no one had anticipated. My phone had died hours ago, the final connection to my former life severed. I'd once commanded cutting-edge technology that could predict market shifts, analyze global data patterns, deploy resources across continents. Now I had a combat knife, a pistol with limited ammunition, and whatever skills I could adapt from my previous existence. What happens now? Danny asked, her voice quiet but steady, the practical question of a survivor. I looked across the water at the burning cities, then back at the island around us, defensible, isolated, with natural resources that might sustain survivors. We wait, see if the military establishes a presence here. If not, we survive on our own, Mira finished. The implications hung between us. No rescue coming, no return to normal. Just a desperate struggle to stay alive in a world transformed beyond recognition. Through the station windows, the fires continued burning across the water, a grim reminder of civilization's fragility. 12 hours. That's all it had taken for the world to end. From corporate power to desperate survival in less than a single day. The technology I'd helped create, the empire I'd built, the wealth I'd accumulated, all rendered meaningless in half a rotation of the Earth. What remained was far more basic: the will to survive, the capacity to adapt, and the realization that in this new reality, no one made it alone. I glanced at Mira and Danny, strangers hours ago, now the only connections I had in a drastically contracted world. The island stood silent around us, a temporary haven in a bay surrounded by chaos. Whether it would remain so, whether the military would come, whether we could survive if they didn't, were questions for tomorrow. For now, there was only this moment, this island, these people, and the long night ahead with its uncertain dawn to follow.